Okay, here's some history here. Filipino sailors created the first Asian American settlement in Louisiana. See that here? St Malo. And these men here wearing the traditional Filipino shirt. Look at that. Even the president of the Philippines and government official wear these white shirts. So let's get on to the story. The first permanent Asian American settlement was a village in 18th century Louisiana where Filipino fishermen resided. So this is going back to the 1700s. What was St Malo? The Manilamen were part of a group of people who created the first Filipino and Asian American settlement in North America, according to history. Their settlement, named after Hawaiian St Malo, was a fishing village along the shores of Louisiana's Lake Bog, Bog or Bogner. This area became home to the enslaved people who had escaped the harsh conditions of the Spanish galleon trade in the 1700s, which was back in the 1600s. 1700s. Yeah, 1700s. That's before the United States was even a nation. According to Stanford University School of Medicine, the galleons were large sailing ships that formed part of the Manila galleon trade from 1565 to 1815. As early as the 1500s, Filipino sailors and indentured servants would leave the ships to settle in different parts of the U.S., as well as modern-day Mexico. The Filipinos who created a community in Louisiana in the late 1700s would later be called Manilamen, after the capital of the Philippines. The oldest known documentation of St. Malo is said to be a Harper Bazaar article published in 1883 that detailed writer Lafcadio Hearn's travels there. The settlement seems to have existed at least 50 years before Hearn's visit. Other settlements similar to St. Malo had also been established in nearby areas. The impact of the Manilamen. These Louisiana-based Filipinos contributed in various ways to U.S. history. They joined the Battle of New Orleans in 1815, which was the final battle of the War of 1812. The victory against the British gave American hope the war would soon end, according to National Geographic. The Manila men also brought fishing and shrimping traditions with them, including an effective method of drying shrimp. However, these Filipinos were not able to acquire citizenship until after the 1803 Louisiana Purchase. Now let me stop here. The Louisiana Purchase goes back to when France had owned that area. France had owned a good sized area of what is now part of the United States. And I believe this was going back to Napoleon Bonaparte. And then they decided the United States government decided at the time, they're going to buy that area from France. France was involved in a lot of wars, and they needed money. Napoleon. They needed money. You remember Napoleon Bonaparte with his wars and so forth in Europe? even going into Russia. So France needed a lot of money, so they decided, well, in order to pay for all these wars, we might as well sell off some territory. And that was a huge, it's called the Louisiana Purchase, but actually it's even areas west of the Mississippi going into what is like areas like what's now Missouri and so forth. So it's a huge part of what is now the United States that France used to own. And back then, before the American Revolution, back then, France and Great Britain and the United Kingdom, they were very much adversaries who never liked each other, hated each other, and competed. So both of them were in North America next to each other and couldn't stand each other. So the French were left here, and the British were kicked out from the colonies due to the revolution, going back to 1776. But yet France was still here. France was still in an area where the British were kicked out. So you can understand how the British must have felt. That's why one of the reasons they came back in 1812. You had the War of 1812, right? So the Naturalization Act of 1790 set the country's naturalization procedures at the time and only applied to white immigrants. By marrying people from other ethnic groups within the region, the Manilamen became a large part of Louisiana's multicultural society, challenging racial stereotypes. What happened to St Malo? The historical village was destroyed in 1915 after a major hurricane caused damage to the New Orleans and the Mississippi Delta region, reported NOAA. Following the storm, some Manilamen stayed in the remains of their settlement. Hurricane Katrina would eventually destroy all artifacts from St Malo and the people who lived there in 2005. The Philippine Louisiana Historical Society erected a maca for St Malo on November 9, 2019, reported ASAM News. There were over 4.2 million Filipino people in the United States in 2019, according to Pew Research Center. 4.2 million. Wow. Probably more. We never know.